Hello, so this video is just to show you how to get the answers for this task here. This is quite a tricky task, so don't worry if you didn't get it. I'm going to go through it now. So if we look at question number 1, so question 1, we need to turn this into a nicer ratio. So just like when we're working with fractions, we don't want decimals involved. You want it to be as simple as possible. So we don't want a decimal involved in our ratio. It makes life too hard. Now what I would do is I would look and I'd go, right, I need to turn this into a whole number. There is an easy way and there's a long way. I'm going to show you the long way because actually, there's a quick way and a long way. I'm going to show you the long way because I think it's easier. Okay, so I'm going to look at 0.25. I'm going to say I want to turn that into 25. So what do I do to 0.25 to turn it into 25? Well, I multiply it by 10, 100. So if I'm doing that to one side of my ratio, I've got to do it to the other. Otherwise it's not fair. So that becomes 25 to 400. Now that is a ratio, but it's not simplified. So I've got to look and go, right, what goes into both 25 and 400? Again, there's quicker routes than I'm going to take. I'm going to take the longest route. I'm going to say they're both multiples of 5. I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So I've got 25 divided by 5 is 5. 400 divided by 5, oh goodness, okay, so 4 divided by 5 doesn't work. 40 divided by 5 is 8, no remainders. 40 into 0 is 80. They're still both multiples of 5, so I'm going to divide by 5 again. So 5s into 5 goes once, 5s into 80, 5s into 8 goes once, remainder 3, 5s into 30 goes 6. So the ratio for that one turns into 1 to 16. Now any eagle-eyed people can see that instead of doing it in 3 steps, I could have done it in 1. Now the one step I could have done it in, I'm going to do it in red down the side here. Move this over slightly. What I could have done, 0.25 is a quarter. How many quarters are there in 1? There are 4. So I could have just times both sides by 4. Okay, so that's the answer to question 1. So that matches question 1 with C. Will it let me draw on it? No, it will not. Oh, pens. Maybe it will now. Okay, so if I go on then, and I go on to question 2, feel free to pause this video and rewind if you need to go back and over anything. So I've got 0.8 to 4. So again, I'm going to go the long way, and then we'll look and see if there was a shorter way afterwards. So 0.8, turn it into a whole number. I'm going to turn it into 8. To turn it into 8, I have to times it by 10. To times one side by 10, I have to times the other side by 10, which gives me 40. So it's 8 to 40. But that's not simplified. Okay, they are both in the same times table. They are both in... Ooh, spotted a... Yeah, they are both in the 2 times table. Now really, I should have divided by 8 to make it simpler, but actually, for this, because of the answers that were on there, I don't need to. So 4 to 20, because that's the answer there. Now ideally, you would take that down further, and ideally, you divide it by 2 again, which would take it down to 2 to 10, and you divide it by 2 again, which would take it down to 1 to 5. Okay, and that should be your final answer, but this wasn't saying that they were in the simplest forms, it was just saying match them up. Okay, so those two do match up. It's not in its simplest form. In an exam you would take it down further, but it's just a matching exercise. So those two are the same. If you were wanting to get from here to here in one step, it would have been quite tricky. What I would have done is you could have taken this down to 0.2 to 1 and then multiply that up. Okay, but this way is actually probably the most straightforward, even if it is a bit long. I would have perhaps from here just divided by 8, but because we wanted to match it to that, it wasn't simplest form. Okay. Right, if I do the next one, let's go on to question 3 and match up question 3. So that's 2/5 to 5. So again, there's a quick way and there's a slow way. I'm going to show you the slightly slower way perhaps. So 2/5. Don't know about you, sometimes I don't like working in fractions. I prefer to work in decimals, especially when they're nice decimals. 2/5 is the same as 4/10, which is 0.4. So I'm going to turn it into a decimal first. Now I can see what to do, because now I can just times both sides by 10. If I times both sides by 10, that gives me 4 to 50. Again, I need to simplify it. They're both even. I'm going to half it. 2 to 25. Okay. And that was my answer, and you'll see it matches up with this one here. Come on. There we go. Okay. Now, to get from here to here in one big step, for any of you that want to try it just in one, can you see that I could have just times by 5? Okay, and we can see that timesing by 10 and then halving is the same as timesing by 5. Okay, so that's why that works. And if I'd have times both sides by 5, a bit like when we were solving equations, it would have got rid of the divide by 5. Okay, you don't need to know that way, that's fine. Oops. Right, question number 4 then. Again, pause the video. You need to, sorry about my pop-ups. Question 4. So we're getting there. 6 to 1/3. Right, so this looks more tricky because we can't do what I did in my last question with it. So I can't do, well, we can if we go with the red word, but we can't turn it into a decimal, because turning it into a decimal, 0.333, you can't times it by anything to make it into a nice whole number. You'll always have decimals. So we've got to look at it as a fraction. Okay, so if we have a look at it as a fraction, it's 1/3. So if I'm going to change 1/3 into a whole number, well, it can either be, I can times it by 1 to be 1/3, I can times it by 2 to be 2/3, or I can times it by 3, which will be 3/3. If I times it by 3, 3/3 is 1. It's equivalent. So I can just times the left and the right hand sides by 3. So 1/3 times 3, 3/3 is 1. 6 times 3 is 18. So that one is that one up there. Okay, 18 to 1. Again, it's timesing by the denominator here. Okay, and finally then, question 5, you'll see it doesn't have an answer. We can already see what it's going to be, which is quite nice because you have to work it out yourself. This one is a little bit trickier, but not too bad. So, first thing I'm going to do, 1/5, that turns nicely into a decimal, like it did for question 3. So I'm going to go and turn them both into decimals first. So 1/5 is the same as 2/10, which is 0.2. So that turns into 0.75 to 0.2. So again, not ideal because we've got decimals. However, this one I could times by 10 and it would be 2, but that would be 2 to 7.5, which I've still got decimals involved. I don't want decimals involved. So I'm going to times this side, so also the other side, by 100. So if I times it by 100, then that's going to be 75 to 20. Now I can see, I mean, technically I could put it in here, but really what they're asking for is for the simplified form. So if I divide both sides by 5, so 75 divided by 5 is 15, 20 divided by 5 is 4. There are no other answers. Okay, so that one matches up with that one. Nothing goes into 15 and 4 together, so that's my answers. So I hope that explains how I got the answers to class 2. Any questions, let me know, ping me an email and I will try and fix them for you. Okay, hope you're doing well. Bye bye.